Good morning, YouTube. Nathan back here with another video presentation. And in this video here today, what I wanted to talk to you guys about is I just want to start this video off by saying that it took me at least 10 times to make this video. I wanted to make sure that in this video I was saying all the right things. I wanted to make sure that I got my points across precisely and clearly as best as I can for you guys to understand where I'm coming from. I also, too, want to make sure that everything that I say that I'm going to talk about in this video is understood and it's heard. So I just want to clear that up before I start the video. As a music fan, I love music. There is a particular 80s band by the name of Tears for Fears. And one of their songs from their album called Songs from the Big Chair, which I highly recommend anyone to listen to. One of the songs that kind of stand out, sung so beautifully, is I Believe. Quote, I believe that when the hurting and the pain has come, when the pain has gone, we will be strong. Oh yes, we will be strong. What am I talking about? I'm talking about what the recent events that have taken place in Minneapolis, Louisville, and so many other places across the United States with unarmed African Americans being killed. First, I want to give my thoughts, prayers, and condolences to those families. I know that with Father's Day around the corner, I know Mother's Day passed this past month. It's tough. I couldn't imagine my dad or my mom not having a son or not having a daughter due to police brutality. Let me just state for the record that I am 25 years old. As an African American young man that is up and coming in this world, I want to make it known that I am scared. I am scared because, for example, somebody like Ahmaud Arbery, who was simply just taking a jog around the neighborhood, was killed by 3 white men who were the law. Well, one was a former police officer, another one was his son, and the other one was someone who just recorded it. Here you have George Floyd killed for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I saw a man die. Breonna Taylor I saw a couple in their home sleeping, getting ready for another day. SWAT team kills her. My question is simple. Is it worth it? A $20 bill, jogging in the neighborhood, killed in your own sleep, a toy gun, untaxed cigarettes. If you don't know what I'm talking about with untaxed cigarettes, I'm talking about Eric Garner. Here we are in 2020. If there was a rewind button on 2020, I would instantly press the stop button. I would instantly press the eject button. However, I would press the fast forward button. Because if you think about it, so far in 2020, nothing good has happened. And so what I've learned is sometimes you can't look back. You have to move forward. I know that doesn't make sense, but as I'm in this video, as within this video, I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from. Why I am disgusted and why I said why I'm scared. Because as a 25-year-old, I have noticed that the color of my skin has instantly become a weapon. Whether it's at work, whether it's school, whether it's when you go in public, the color of my skin is essentially a weapon. I want to talk about where I stand with the police. First and foremost, I want to take the opportunity to thank those police officers that actually do a lot for their communities. That doesn't get talked about in the media. We know that there are good cops, and we know that there are bad cops. But in this instance, this is another situation where we have to question our police departments, how they're trained, not only physically, but mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. When you have an officer that killed George Floyd, as a responder, first responder, I should say, for the other three accomplices that were present at the time, how can you not understand? How do you not understand that if a man is as saying, "I can't breathe, I'm going to die," and your colleague has his knee on his neck and he's saying that, why didn't none of you take the initiative to say, "Hey, something is going on with this man. We need to get him some help"? Why? Why is a former police officer and his son and a neighbor so quick to become the law and chase after somebody because of a string of recent robberies in their neighborhood. Are you scared? Do you feel intimidated? Like I said, the color of my skin is essentially a weapon. I went to a community college for a few years, and this one particular time there was a social community town hall policing thing. Members of the police department came, they spoke, and those who were at the students, faculty, we all spoke. And this one particular officer, really nice guy, really nice guy. I've talked to him, I've reached out to him a couple of times and spoken to him. And he essentially said the same thing. He says when he goes out, whether it's lunch or when he walks around with that uniform on, with that badge, with that gun around his waist, yeah, he feels targeted. He feels the public pressure. Because what you're seeing, the point I'm trying to make is when you're seeing for 8 minutes, 46 seconds, or when you're seeing a recorded video, or when you're seeing somebody being put in a chokehold, we, the public, have essentially become the court of public opinion. Whether it's a body camera, whether it's social media, except doesn't matter. We have become the public. We have become the public court. Somebody must be held accountable. At the end of the day, my question is plain and simple. How many of us African Americans, men or women, have to be killed in order for accountability to be held? With all due respect, when you look at the Trayvon Martins of the world, or the Michael Browns of the world, Eric Garner, Freddie Grays, those families are not going to be able to rest in peace. Money can't bring back a loved one. But justice can bring peace. Accountability can bring hope, can bring closure. And I hope with what's going on now, because this is just not a United States movement, this is a worldwide movement, where people have officially woken up and realized, damn. Even though also too, I want to state this for the record, I also too believe because of what we have experienced with COVID-19, I think all of us are frustrated. We've lost a job, a business is closed, frustrated with online stuff. You know, if you have kids, you have to deal with making sure that they're taken care of. You have to worry about, wow, am I going to go back to work? Damn, am I next to get COVID-19? There's so many different things that are going on. And this was just the powder keg that was just waiting to explode. If you ask me, I am happy that those 4 officers for the George Floyd death are charged. My hope and prayer is that not only will justice be served for George Floyd and his family, Breonna Taylor's family, and the other 120 and counting, I hate to say that, sadly enough, African American families that have been killed. Just in the recent past few days, an 18-year-old girl in Akron, Ohio, was gunned down in her car with her grandmother. You have another young young African American male in Texas that was hung in front of a high school. Do you not? Why? What's it going to take? Somebody must be held accountable for what's going on. I have a brother that is 17 years old. I have a sister that's 24 years old. I'm scared for them too. Because as I said, our skins are virtually weapons. Not just them, parents too. Two parents that always looked out for us, always showed what's best for us, taught us, and helped us to become what we are today. Because without them, and without them educating me what they had to endure growing up, and what they're trying to expose me to now in this world when I get older, and what I'm going to be exposed to, they want to make sure that I'm prepared for it. Not by the having some weapon in your hand, but by this. By education, by being smart, and by being prepared, and by ensuring that when I have kids, when I become a dad, they don't have to go through what I have, but what we have to go through now. It's very, very interesting to see that kids 10 and younger are now becoming involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. Not saying nothing's wrong with that. But these are kids, these are babies. And they're being thrown into the fire. Like I stated, I have nothing wrong with that. I just have concerns. I'll give you an example. I was on Twitter, and there were three African American men. One was in his late 40s, early 50s. The other one was in the same age bracket. I believe he was 26. And the youngest one was 16. You would think you're saying to yourself, okay, three age groups. But the one that was the oldest was scared, panicking. If anything, I don't want to use the word hallucinating, but he just did not know what to do. He actually said those words. What are we going to do? What can we do? And you'd be surprised that the 26-year-old virtually essentially told him to get a grip. He turned to the 16-year-old. He said, hey, listen, 10 years from now, I don't want you to go through what I'm going through. 10 years from now, he expects him to be he's supposed to be educated, and he wants to ensure that he does not have to protest to ensure that people like kids like him or anybody have to go through this in 10 years. We have been going at this for decades. Civil rights movement, in the early 1900s, after World War One, and I know I talked about the police. I haven't forgotten about that. I want to finish that up, that topic up. But it just seems like we are just lit. It's like it's if history's repeating itself. Where we are a modern day civil rights movement 2020, where since really, if you think about it, really since the 2000, since I go back, I'll start 2010, where social media really started to become a little bit more, where you started to see more things. Eric Garner, okay, Philando Castle, where you're seeing these deaths on social media. What I believe with the police, I do think that these departments need to be turned upside down. I think that you need to gut them out, clean them out. You need to have you need to have a social relations person in there. But I think we really need to really test the mental aspects of those that want to have that badge to protect and serve the communities. Because whether we like it or not, we have some officers that just are not mentally fit. And I don't know what it is to be a police officer. Back in 2013, when I had graduated from high school, I had the aspirations of becoming a police officer or a firefighter or something in that field. Now I see why 2020 I chose not to go that route. Simply because there's just so much that goes into it, to not just a physical aspect, but a mental aspect. And I get that, there's some hotheads out there, and I get that, you're afraid. I understand that you have a family to go home to, but does your training include having your knee on somebody's neck? Does your training, he's reaching for something, and I get that you're to protect yourself. I understand that. I do. But for someone to say, I can't breathe, your training is still have your knee on their neck? With George Floyd, Eric Garner, same thing. You still had him in a chokehold, said he couldn't breathe. I believe that how I look at police reform. I think you need to get out these police departments, because let's just be honest, we have, and this is not with the police, this is where any way we work. We have bad apples. We have those that let's just call it what it is. There are bad apples no matter where we work. But I think this is a good example of we need to look at the police officers a little bit different. There needs to be more of a mental aspect, of like a sociological test, psychology test, something like that. And it also too, there needs to be a lot of community relation tests for the police as well. I think that I think all that matters. But at the end of the day, somebody has to be held accountable for these deaths. Then that's when I want to get into next is our politicians. I want to say this for the record. Excuse me. We have seen a giant soap opera in our nation's capital. I have seen politicians publicly embarrass each other. I have seen politicians cry. I have seen politicians go on like a protest. I've seen a circus. I don't see unity. And this does not matter if you're Democrat or Republican. The one thing that I've noticed is that what is going on in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., to me shows the racial divide between African Americans, those of other minorities, and white people. Because I'm not sure if you guys can understand where I'm going with this, but it starts at the top and it trickles its way down. It's like when you have your foundation, right? When you build a house, when you build, like when you build a house, you need a foundation. Okay, you need to find some land, then your foundation, then you build your house. Well, let's just say for the sake of this example, the foundation is the laws that are presided over our land, and then those that control it. Well, here it is in 2020. Why are there not laws? Why is it we have a justice system that's still not fixed? We have African Americans that are in jail, that have been in jail for 20, 30 years for murders they didn't commit. We have officers that have killed people. And I don't want to bash the police in this video. I'm just using them as an example. There are police officers that were involved, and they never got charged. The charges didn't stick. We have a circus, literally. If you ask me, and I want to, and please don't take this wrong, but when I saw that video of those politicians in the state capitol in Washington taking a knee, I didn't not like that, because essentially what it showed was to me, you as politicians need to take action. And that's why I firmly believe that voting is important. Because voting, to me, makes the change. Because I think we need to remind politicians, especially when we put them in these higher up positions, that they don't just work for the people, not themselves. Because we have politicians that are currently in office that just care about money. Let's just call it what it is. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of hearing that we're in another war, that we're giving weapons to, well, we're giving military weapons to the police to quell these protests. Actual weapons. That's alarming. Getting these drugs off our streets, which has been an issue for going almost I would say as early as after the Vietnam War. There is just so much that needs to be cleaned up in the United States. And it starts with our politicians. We need to get people that are going to, as a congressman, as a representative, that are going to get in these positions and take responsibility and be held accountable. They're going to do the job that some of these politicians can't do. Because one thing I noticed is that politics has mixed into such things like sports. Politics is mixed into our jobs, our economies, race. Because here it is in 2020, we're still talking about how there's a economic, educational, poverty, healthcare, all these issues that we as African Americans face. These issues are still talked about in 2020. What does that say? You know, I don't know about you guys. When I said this is a worldwide movement, I find it highly embarrassing when another prime minister of a country was asked about the president of the United States for 21 seconds, couldn't get anything couldn't get anything out of his mouth. I think that's embarrassing. I didn't want to talk about him in this video, but I felt like this is the right thing to do. He is showing. He is fuming the flames. He's fanning them to a point where he's making it about himself, and he's offending a lot of people. I know today is Juneteenth Day, and I know the historical reference behind it. But he wanted to do an event today in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He made a statement by saying he made it famous. He didn't make it famous. What did you make it famous for? If you guys don't know, in 1921, if I remember correctly, was our Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that was essentially taken from us simply because of the colors of our skin, racial segregation, systematic racism and oppression. The fact that we had our own Wall Street, the fact that we had our own economy in that little area that was taken from us. Historians say that's probably one of the most saddest moments, deadliest moments in our history, particularly when it comes to racial inequality. Here you have a guy that's the President of the United States, his Commander-in-Chief, making idiotic statements, ignorant statements like that. Here you have somebody that ordered his Attorney General for those atrocious actions, what he did at Lafayette Park. The same president that held up a Bible. A Bible. When you see things like that, that should be alarming to you. Because as as I was as one who is trying to get to, who's trying as a young Christian, that's that it's just something about seeing that photo that really bothered me. That was disturbing, because what that shows is that he believes that he has a power over people, and he's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that he stays in power. He's going to do and to intimidate those who stand in his way. He used the Bible. No weapon shall form against that. No weapon shall prosper. And in that moment, he used that as a weapon. It's insane. This is the same guy that most of the time doesn't know what he's talking about. This is the same person that talked about telling people to inject themselves with disinfectant. He's essentially a jackass. And what he has shown during a time like this, we cannot look to him for leadership. We can't. Personally, if you ask me a long time ago, he lost me. He lost me when he said that Andrew Jackson, the seventh president of the United States, who was known, the hero of New Orleans, the backwoodsman of Tennessee, who was responsible for removing a plethora of African Americans from the Southeast into the Midwest of preserved reservations known as the Trail of Tears. He said that man could have prevented the American Civil War from happening. Andrew Jackson died in 1845. The Civil War started April 12th, 1861. Mind you, the same Civil War that was fought on the foundation of slavery. And personally, if you think about it, and I want to say this, really, the American Civil War started really after the American Revolutionary War. Personally, because you had states that couldn't ratify when the Articles of Confederation needed to be done with. How can I say this? They couldn't come and agree of how to end slavery, even though that there are examples during that time that slaves like Deborah Sampson or I cannot think of her name. Her name just completely slipped my mind. But there are numerous cases of African Americans being freed during the American Revolutionary War and after it. When you hear someone say, "Make America great again," that's scary and that's intimidating. And that makes me uncomfortable. Because like I said earlier in this video, the color of my skin has become a weapon. And what he has shown is poor leadership. What he's also shown is that he's not a leader of men. He's shown that he does not know what he's doing. And he has shown that, and he has really shown the true divide of the United States of America between minority groups and white people. He's clearly shown that. Now, also, too, in this video, I wanted to talk about why I also think this is not a good time for sports. as we know, as we're now in the middle of June, no basketball. Well, basketball was supposed to be coming soon, sometime next month on either the 30th or 31st. Major League Baseball can't come to an agreement how many games to play, pay. NAACP. I'm not. Excuse me. The NCAA. Excuse me. Not the NCAA. I apologize. The NCAA. We have, as I call, skeletons in the closet. People being fired, and this is just not with sports. This is with anybody, any company, anywhere. People being fired because of what they stand for. Now, we all have our beliefs and our opinions. Okay, we ought to respect that. But at the end of the day, you check those when you walk in the door. We have a NASCAR driver, can't think of his name, Ray something, who is a part-time driver, I don't even recall, even driving one lap at NASCAR. And he just the other not too long ago, just decided to quit because he wasn't feeling the fact that NASCAR decided to ban the Confederate flag. In the NBA, you have players that are, well, Kyrie Irving, I should say, talking about that he wants to sit out. See, I will say there's one athlete that has not really gotten the media attention. Her name is Maya Moore. Maya Moore is a WNBA basketball player for the Minnesota Lynx. And she has taken now, I believe this is her second season off, to bring aware of the social injustices that are against African Americans. She's done a good number of things, particularly freeing those that were not responsible for certain crimes that were committed. Here's Kyrie Irving wanting to sit out either, and not just him, other players too. And I get because of COVID-19, you don't want to bring this disease home to your family. You're scared about playing. I get that. But when you're making a decision like that, you got to have a plan. And in this case, Kyrie Irving doesn't have a plan. But this is also a good opportunity for sponsors, owners, to step up to the plate. What are these guys going to do to bring attention to ending racism? Helping minority groups with programming, such as after school programs, sport camps, educational programs, something like that. What are these owners and sponsors going to do? Then you have Major League Baseball, who can't come to an agreement about pay, about games. Same thing. I wouldn't you're telling me to take a pay cut? I have to put food on my family's table. I get it. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are just so many skeletons in the closet. Sports right now would be a distraction to what's really going on. It would be a distraction to the point where we're just putting what's going on right now in front of us to the side. Some of us need to be educated. Some of us need to really sit back and understand, you know what? This is bigger than sports. Look at Colin Kaepernick. I understood what Colin Kaepernick was doing. Colin Kaepernick was trying to bring awareness to the social injustices. Even though it disappointed me that nobody really saw what he was really no one really got the point at first. And here it is, 4 or 5 years later, now we all understand it. Colin Kaepernick was virtually ousted from the NFL because nobody said, well, what do you mean by social injustices? He was bringing awareness to that. He wasn't kneeling for the flag. He wasn't kneeling because he didn't like the national anthem. He was kneeling because he didn't like these social injustices against African Americans. But again, the media messed up, when you're cooking something, messed up the recipe and put something else in there, stirred it up, and made it into something different, to where he was virtually vilified. To the NFL owners, if they signed Colin Kaepernick, we're going to get phone calls. Like, for example, the New England Patriots. If Robert Kraft today decided, let's just say that during that time, if he decided to sign Colin Kaepernick, Robert Kraft's getting phone calls within the first hour the next day. Well, you signed Colin Kaepernick, we're pulling sponsors away. We're pulling this sponsor away. You have Drew Brees. Drew Brees literally became public enemy number one because he was asked a specific question. He wasn't asked about, what do you think about what the recent protests in Minnesota, Louisville, others. In that video, he was never asked about that. He was specifically asked about kneeling for the flag. I respect that he had ancestors that fought for this country. I respect that. But at the end of the day, as an athlete or as anybody, I would say that's not what you should be asking. What you should be asking is, what's the plan we need to have in order to ensure this, seeing a black man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds dying, doesn't happen to the next black man or the next black kid. What are we going to do about this from being prevented from happening in the future? That's what you should be asking. Don't ask me about the flag. (2020). I'm going to reference that same English band that I referenced in the beginning of the video, Tears for Fears. My question is simple. When do we sow the seeds of love? When do we bring peace and love back to a world that is broken, that's divided? Because what you see now, especially with Black Lives Matter, and especially with African Americans being killed, the systematic racism that we face. Because I want to make this clear. I want to make sure I understand. I want to make sure that I should have said this earlier, but I want to state this for the record. I have never experienced being pulled over by a cop. I have not been called a nigger by somebody, by a white counterpart. But I have experienced racism. I have experienced it again because the color of my skin's a weapon. We all experience racism in many different ways. But the one thing that compelled me to make this video was the social media influencers. Because the one thing I've noticed is that people were sitting there saying, well, if you're staying silent or you're not protesting, you're part of the problem. So what you have to understand is that some of us aren't LeBron James. Some of us don't have a platform to speak on. When you see looting in the streets, when you see that, that's the only way the unheard the unspoken can be heard. When you have the media that spins narratives, how can you use how can you say that there's no, how can you say, you know, if you don't have a platform you're part of the problem when you have a platform that spins the narrative, that flips what is being said, when it takes advantage to create storylines? These same social media influencers that are at these protests, they're making it about themselves. They're worried about their brand. They're not doing it for the benefit of Black Lives Matter, in my opinion. They're doing it for their own good. Some people like myself aren't fortunate to have a YouTube channel. I may not be able to touch a million people like LeBron James can, but I'm hoping I can touch somebody with this video and understand where I'm coming from. Also, too, I want to say this. With the recent things that have occurred to show against racial inequality, I personally believe that taking down a statue or renaming something or anything of those natures does not make me feel any better, because there's so much more into that. Because you got one that you have to ask yourselves when you're seeing a statue, or when you're seeing, like, for example, Uncle Ben's rice or Aunt Jemima pancake syrup and mix. Are you doing that for the greater good of the people, or are you doing it because, well, yeah, we don't want to get in trouble? Well, if you knew about it, why would you put the product out there in the first place? Now, I know that there may be some people that may say, well, you know, it's just syrup, it's just rice. But if you understand the context of it, if you go back to the history of how these products were made, you say, oh, okay, it makes sense. But little things like that, taking out a statue or renaming a building, that doesn't make me feel any better. What makes me feel better is when we vote and when we get change. Well, change doesn't come easily. When we have people that are going to be held accountable and do the necessary things to ensure that we hope we don't have to deal with again, that makes me feel better. It may appeal to some, but it doesn't make me feel any better at all. It doesn't. Because at the end of the day, those statues were there, been there for 100-something years, particularly those that were of Confederate. They go back to as early as, I believe, like the late 1800s, by ancestors, or even those did by the public, by the citizens. You know, it's kind of funny. We have a holiday, Columbus Day, of an explorer that is known for the killing of Native Americans. Yet and still, history books want to know, well, he was the first person. He traveled halfway around the world. They don't want to talk about how he and his brother were responsible for the killings of Native Americans by bringing diseases and damn near slaughtering a population. All for greed. Again, referencing this 80s band. What I see in 2020, quote, and the song is called Mother's Talk. Quote, my future's formed with the change in the weather. We can't work it out. When the wind blows, when the mother's talks, when the wind blows, end quote. That's what I see now in 2020. Because whether we like it or not, particularly those that are of white, we need to get them a little uncomfortable and let them understand. We will continue to shout, let it all out. These are the things I can do without. Come on, I'm talking to you. Come on. Referencing the same English 80s band. This is all, to me, very important. I felt like it was very important for me to get all that out in this video. I do believe that change comes. I do believe that peace and love will be upon us. I hope that those families get justice. I really do. Because, as I said, I don't want my kids one day to have to endure this. But also, too, at the same time, we have to take it one day at a time. I believe prayer. I believe having that foundation of faith. I believe that just looking to God, especially during a time like this, is so important. Because whether we notice it or not, we know that He's working. We know that He sees the pain, the crying, the tears. He sees all of that. And I know that things will get better, as I said already. But we need to put trust and faith. And we just need to continue this movement to the point where we will get tired of saying the same thing over and over and over again. I'm not going to stop, because I want these things to be brought to attention. I want these things to be brought to the table. I want us to all understand what is in front of us. Because sometimes you have to deal with the reality in front of you. Or you can close your eyes and act like nothing's happening. That's all I wanted to say in this video. Please stay safe. Listen, like I stated, things will get better. It just took me so long to make this video, because I wanted to make sure, like I said the right things, and I felt as though it was necessary. I felt as though it just had to be done. And I don't know about you, but I have hope. I have a positive outlook on things, especially for the new decade, especially for 2020 to come. But you're on the lookout for another video or two the next coming few days or so. I would like to really continue. I would like to start a discussion. I really would. Let me know in the comments down below, how, your reaction, your thoughts. What do you guys think? So, but on that note, I'm going to sign out. Peace.